Welcome to New York Centric, a product of the NHL Wraparound podcast for April Fool's Day 2025. Vic Morren along with Neil Smith. And we'll be joined by our special guest, Colin Stephenson from Newsday in just a moment. But Neil, before we get into this, going to hit with a little bit of trivia as we start all of our New York Centric shows. And my mentor and first gentleman I worked with in the business, Stan Fischler, the noted hockey author, the hockey maven, turned 93 on Monday, still writing, living in Israel. And he is completing the donation of all of his books, which are at least 90 and it may be upwards of 110. Those are being donated to the Islanders/UBS Arena, where much of his memorabilia is on display at the Stan Fischler press level. The question: the first of Stan's books were published in January of 1967. Very simply, who was the subject? And we'll be back at the end of the show to answer that. So with that, Neil, let's bring in Colin.
Too bad the trivia question wasn't who won the Stanley Cup that year. Guess we would all know that.
Yeah, we'd all know that.
Colin, welcome to New York Centric NHL Wraparound. Good to have you on. Glad that you were able to do this for us, and we really appreciate, as we do with all guests, but we do appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Yes, well, thanks for having me. It's always fun to talk hockey, and I think we got some interesting hockey going on here. We got playoff races and teams trying to get in, and this is probably, I guess, the playoffs would be the best time of year, but this is probably a very close second.
No, it is, and it's because and you're covering one of the most mysterious teams in the league. The Rangers at the best of times are mysterious, but this season has just been, and I have a close understanding of Rangers hockey, but this year's Rangers edition has been just bizarre. To go from the President's Trophy of last year to the Barclay Goodrow, Jacob Trouba, Chris Kreider, Lindgren is gone. You've got both their tough defensemen are gone. You go through a winning streak at the beginning, a 12-4 start, then a big losing streak, and then a bunch of different changes. And my head is spinning myself, wondering what I'm going to see next out of them. And I guess you're a much better person to answer that than I am, because you're actually at their practices and you're at their games, and I only watch them on TV, occasionally in person. But what the hell is going on with the Rangers?
I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, I've been trying to wrap my brain around it all season long, to be honest with you. I mean, it's as you said, they did win the President's Trophy last year. They set a franchise record with wins and points, and to go from that to this is really, really hard to fathom. They're here because their best players haven't played like their best players and haven't produced what they did last year. Obviously, Artemi Panarin had a career year last year, 120 points. Alexis Lafreniere, 28 goals and 50-something points, a career year for him. Earned him a big contract extension, and they haven't replicated that. Panarin, I think, has been really good, but not 120 points good, certainly. Lafreniere has not been as good as he was last year. A lot of guys haven't been as good as they were last year. AndreMiller hasn't been as good as he was last year in a contract year, which is mystifying. So those are the reasons, right? I mean, they're the reasons why they're not comfortably in a playoff position. Why those things are the case, I couldn't tell you. I mean, my best guess is, for sure they overachieved last year. They probably weren't the best team in the regular season. They just happened to finish with the most points. I mean, Florida, I would think was probably the best team all along. I think that's what we all believed anyway. So yeah, they overachieved a little bit last year, but to come down from President's Trophy winners to a team that is, as we speak, 8 games left and outside of the playoffs looking in, is really, really hard to fathom, especially when, for me, I'm a big goaltending guy. So especially when you have the goaltending that they have in Igor Shesterkin and Jonathan Quick, it's hard to imagine that they could have fallen this far. But, I think, Chris Drury, the general manager, has clearly wanted to change up the roster a little bit. The rumblings in the summer where he wanted to move on from Jacob Trouba. He did move on from Barclay Goodrow, as you mentioned, and he's done some surgery on the team and the roster, in season and on the fly. And I don't know how well that's working out. So everything that went right for them last year has gone wrong for them this year. Why that's the case, I couldn't tell you.
Our show is definitely not about trying to tar and feather people or be negative at all. It's just about trying to figure out what's going on with all the different teams in the league and try to deliver that to the listeners. But the thing that I keep saying is these problems are self-inflicted problems. They're friendly fire. They're not something that came from the outside. They were created from within. And correct me if I'm wrong on that from your perspective.
The Trouba thing and the Goodrow thing were a mess, right? I think both of them had partial no trades, and I think Drury needed to move on and needed to create salary cap space in some way. And the way he went about offloading Barclay Goodrow really seemed to annoy a lot of people and really kind of rub people the wrong way. Putting him on waivers, and then he gets claimed by San Jose, which was clearly a team he didn't want to go to. But San Jose's general manager, we know, has a very close relationship with Chris Drury. I mean, they played together at Boston University, and Mike Grier did work under Drury, one of Drury's first hires when he got the job in 2020. So that just all seemed a little fishy, and I think it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And the Jacob Trouba thing, to have his name be out there so publicly in the summer around the draft that they were trying to move on from this guy, all the stuff that was out there, they tried to get him to submit his no trade list before the July 1st deadline, all this kind of stuff. I was at the draft, and it was being reported that he was going to be traded, the second day of the draft. So that was just ugly. And then of course, he didn't get traded, and we came to training camp, and he spoke to the media on the first day. It was just an awkward situation. It turned out how it turned out. I mean, they got off to, as you said, a fast start. I don't think they were playing great in that start. They were winning games, but even at 12-4-1, I mean, none of us were terribly impressed with the way they were winning the games. So it was a bit of a mirage. And then when the losses started to come, Chris Drury felt the need to do something. Trouba's name came out there again, and along with Chris Kreider as players he was looking to move on from. So the whole thing was just uncomfortable from the very beginning. And you would think over the course of a 6-month season, you'd kind of get over that, especially since Trouba was moved in December, so there was plenty of time. But nothing seems to have worked out the way it was supposed to. You could make an argument that Will Borgen has replaced Trouba in terms of what he gives you on the ice, but I don't know that anybody's replaced Trouba in terms of what he gave you in the locker room, right? I mean, this guy was the captain, he was a leader. And I think he was friends with a lot of guys, and I think that human nature being what it is, I mean, I think that that kind of ruffled some feathers and hurt some feelings. I'm not saying guys aren't trying. I would never say that. Guys are trying, but it's just not working out. And the more you try and do stuff, if you're the general manager, to change things up, I don't know how effective any of it's been. And now he did go out and got JT Miller, and I think that was a good get for him. Will Borgen, as I said, has played well for them on the ice, but I just don't know. I mean, just hasn't hit, and I'm stuck for a reason as to why not.
Bill Parcells, longtime football coach, said that your record is what you are, and this club is tied for the second wild card with Montreal. Canadians have one more game to play, so the Rangers are technically in the wild card 3 spot. And this most recent road trip, I think, was very reflective of what we've seen all season. They lose in Los Angeles last Tuesday, 2 shots in the first period, and even though they scored the first goal of the game, this theme of the late wake-up call was certainly out there because they didn't start that game well. And then the mind-boggling loss in Anaheim in overtime on Friday, which you couldn't put up a stat line like this in your wildest dreams, that they're up by 2 goals in the third period with less than 6 minutes left. They give up only 5 shots in the third period and manage to get scored on 3 times.
Right.
They have 5 power plays.
Right. That's
Do
insane.
score on 1, but fail to bury the game with an extended 5-on-3, and then they never see the puck in overtime to really culminate a game where defensive coverages, puck management, and just the overall awareness of what the situations are and how to play pucks was perversely fascinating to watch this thing unravel. And of course, they go and win the next night in San Jose big, but that was expected. But that's a road trip. Neil and I agreed at the start. They needed to win 2 out of 3.
Right.
And they come out 1-1-1. And that right now is the difference between the second and the third wild card positions.
That's exactly right. I mean, I was watching that I didn't make the trip, so I was watching on television like most everyone else. It was unbelievable to see them not be, especially as their power play had been on a long drought, 0 for whatever, 20 or whatever it was coming in. And then they get a power play goal, and you think, oh, okay, that's broken the dam, and the power play is good now. And then they get 5 power plays in that third period, and as you said, they scored on the 1. They don't get a shot on goal on that 5-on-3. You can't score if you don't get a shot on goal. So it's almost as if they panicked a little bit. And again, it goes back to what worked last year is not working this year. Last year, they were the team that would come back in the third period from deficits, and they would find a way to win that you didn't think they were going to win, and then somehow they would pull it out, and you'd be like, oh, they did it again. And this year, it's almost the opposite. It's where you have a 3-1 lead going into the third. You have a 4-2 lead with less than 10 minutes to play in the third against a team, by the way, that's not going to the playoffs and is young and rebuilding and not very good. And you find a way to give that up. And it's the reverse of what they did last year. And so in life and in sports, I mean, every year is going to be a little different.
Yep.
and this year is clearly different from last year. What you'd like to do is you'd like to assume based on past results that, what's going to happen in the future. And that has not worked for them at all. Now, it's not worked because guys haven't lived up to their, the back of their hockey cards. Chris Kreider, I don't know what's going on with him. He's had a back injury. He told us about. So he's been battling that all year. I think he's got 19 goals. I mean, this is a guy that you counted on for 35 goals, and so that's quite a drop off. And so again, the reasons are there. We just don't know what the underlying reasons are, and I can't figure it out. And at this point, I still, inside of me, believe that, hey, this is a team that won the President's Trophy last year. They're going to make the playoffs. They're going to find a way. They're going to do it on the last day or whatever. But, there's no real hard evidence that they're going to do that. They haven't won 3 games in a row since mid-November. And so every time you think, well, all they need to do is get on a little bit of a run, they win 2 games and then they lose a bunch of games, and they win 2 games and then they lose again. So they haven't shown that they can do it, but I can't believe that last season was such a mirage. I have to believe that somewhere in there is a playoff team.
Tell me, Colin, last thing from me on the Rangers is I got to ask about it. Believe it or not, when I was GM of the Rangers in 1989, Peter Laviolette was one of my players. He was playing in Flint for our farm club and played a couple of years under my regime and then went on to have this stellar coaching career that he's had. But when I watch the games on TV, he looks like a beaten man. Like he just looks like a beaten man, and behind the bench, I mean, you would never know that. Again, going back to this President's Trophy thing, record-breaking year last year, his first year. I mean, he rode in on a white horse and rode out on a pillow last year, and now this year, I don't know how he's going to survive this. I just don't. I mean, and this is sort of his resume of do really well on the first year, and then things start to go downhill from there. And I just wonder, again, I'm watching it on TV. I'm not at their practices. I have no reason to say that he's not doing a good job because I don't know. But I just wondered what your perspective is on that.
Well, so that's interesting. I mean, he's been a topic. Obviously, I think most of us expect that certainly if they don't make the playoffs, that he won't be back, right? But I think a lot of it is this team seems to need change. They had David Quinn, who was the coach at the start of the rebuild, and then they got tired of him and they wanted to change. They went to Gerard Gallant, who was a more hands-off kind of guy. After 2 years of him, they realized they needed to coach more, so now they bring in Peter Laviolette. And I think everybody bought in last year, and everybody played as they were supposed to play. The practices were hard. Everybody raved about how great these practices were because the year before they really didn't practice very hard. So guys just bought in last year, and this year they haven't bought in fully. And some of that may have to do with the whole Jacob Trouba, Barclay Goodrow, all that kind of stuff mess where guys' hearts weren't fully into it and the buy-in wasn't completely there. But I do think you have to look at the core players because this is their third coach for this group. And if he doesn't make it past this season, then they'll be going on to another coach. So, who's the perfect guy for this group, right? So I think at some point you have to look at the group and say, well, what's wrong with this group? And I think that's the reason why Chris Drury has tried to change the core on the fly. But you wonder, Panarin is going to play how Panarin plays, right? And you wonder whether Chris Kreider, Mika Zibanejad, guys that are long-time Rangers now, you wonder if they're just if you just need to kind of change it up a little bit and get some guys in that are more like JT Miller, that are more sort of straight line players, that are chippy and gritty and things like that. So, that's been something that, when the group was initially put together by Jeff Gorton, that was the last element, that grit element that needed to be added, right? And Gorton and John Davidson were let go, and Drury came in, and he sought to add that grit element. He got Goodrow, he brought in Ryan Reeves, people like that. It just seems like they haven't been able to capture that perfect balance between skill and grit. And at the end of the day, this is the third coach now that I'm listening to that's complaining that the team doesn't play direct enough, that they're too east-west. And so you just wonder, the players revert to that east-west, habits, and the coaches kind of tolerate it when things are going well, but when things aren't going well, that's why they're not going well, is because the team has become too east-west rather than north-south. And so, yes, I agree with you. I think that Peter Laviolette, his track record is what it is, and I think if they don't make the playoffs, I don't expect them to survive this. But I wonder if the problem is not more with the roster than it is with the coach.
Colin, potential change with the roster coming up. And before we move on to the Islanders and Devils, I want to talk about Gabe Perreault signing his entry-level contract out of BC. Had also a very successful World Junior tournament back in December and January with 10 points for the gold medal winning U.S. team. Should we expect to see him?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I don't think you're going to burn the first year of his entry-level contract for the final 8 games and then not put him in. So I think he's going to play. Will he play? As we speak, it's Tuesday. They're back to practice today. They had Monday off. They have game Wednesday. So will he be in the lineup Wednesday? That'll be a question. I would expect that he would. I think you bring him here, you might as well throw him in there and see if he can help. There's no point in bringing him here and not doing that. So I would expect that he'll be in. I would expect, too, that if he goes into the lineup, I don't expect that he's going to go in and play on the fourth line, for instance. I think he's going to get quality ice time, and you're going to give him a chance. I mean, look, the biggest hole that they've had has been, they haven't had the right wing to play with Kreider and Zibanejad, or they haven't had the right wing to play with Panarin and Trocheck, although last year Alexis Lafreniere filled that hole quite well. There's opportunity there, I think, if you're looking for a right wing to play in your top 6. So I think Perreault will get a look in the top 6. I mean, right now you have Brendan Othmann, who is their 2021 first-round pick, that's playing with Panarin and Trocheck, or has been anyway. And, he's done a lot of good things. He's been direct. He's taken shots. He's gritty. He's this, he's that. But he's got 2 points in I don't know how many games. And so I think that Perreault. I could see Perreault getting a look in that spot. But he certainly will get quality ice time in the top, top six, or certainly I wouldn't expect him to be in the bottom six. I would expect him to be in the top six, and I would expect that he'd be in the lineup on Wednesday when they play Minnesota.
And by the way, Vic, he is on the ice right behind Colin. I just got a text on Left Wing Lock saying that he's on the ice for practice.
All right. Good update there. And in addition to that game against Minnesota, on Wednesday, the Rangers will round out their week in New Jersey on Saturday afternoon and then come home for a game against Tampa Bay on Monday. Let's move on to the Islanders. 3 regulation losses during the week. They're in dire straits right now with a 3-point deficit. They still have 9 games left, but now they're going to have to jump over 4 teams. So the ground that they had made up in the previous weeks, they have kind of given back, and they've left less runway for themselves. They lose a pretty inexcusable game against Vancouver, a very undermanned team last Wednesday, and they were beaten really by the lunch pail guys on the Canucks. Ilya Sorokin was pulled after the 4th of the 5 Canuck goals, only faced 19 shots in that game. And then in Tampa on Saturday, lost 5-3. Pretty noble comeback, being down 4-0, got it to 4-3, but couldn't complete it. Sorokin, 4 goals against on 23 shots, so they turn to Marcus Hogberg on Sunday in Carolina. He gives up 6 goals on 30 shots. And are we now seeing the loss of Semyon Varlamov really manifesting itself in that Sorokin looks tired? They can't play Hogberg enough so that Sorokin gets refreshed. So is this a situation where they're just going to have to ride Sorokin to the end, and what happens, happens?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think we've seen that when Hogberg was injured, they didn't have a guy that they could call up from Bridgeport that they had any trust in at all. And so Sorokin was playing back-to-back games, and he's got a lot of minutes on him this season. And so, yes, I could see where he would be tired, because he has had to carry a much bigger load than you expected him to carry at the beginning of the season. So, yeah, no, absolutely. But at this point, with 9 games to go, you're 3 points back of a playoff spot. You don't have a choice. You have to pull out all the stops. To try and get there. There was a time in the season when I kept saying to myself, they should sell. They should, just take their lumps this year. James Hagens is going to be on Boston College. He was a line mate of Gabe Perreault's. He's a Long Island guy. He's going to be in the, a very high draft pick. At one point, they were talking about him possibly being the first pick overall. Maybe that's not going to be the case anymore, but he's going to go high. And I think if you're the Islanders and you can get a local guy from Hauppauge, Long Island, in the top, 3 or 4 picks or 5 picks, that would be great, right? So I mean, there was one point where I was thinking, just sell, and whatever happens, and they chose not to do that. And they chose instead to go all in and try and make the playoffs. So now you're at that point where with 9 games to go, you got to make the playoffs, right? I mean, otherwise, what have you done? So yeah, you got to pull out all the stops, and I don't know that you can afford to give anybody a rest right now. And so you're just going to have to live with what Sorokin can give you. But it's not just him. You need more from everybody, right? I mean, you need Anthony Duclair to score a goal now and again. You need somehow to make up for the fact that they didn't sell at the deadline, they didn't buy at the deadline, but they lost Brock Nelson, who was probably their best player.
Yeah.
So you need more from everybody. But yes, that definitely includes the goalie as well.
And Sorokin is going to start tonight. That's been confirmed against Tampa Bay Lightning. Just to add to what you're saying, Colin, their schedule is tough. It's not only tough from looking at it, when we all started looking at this 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, but today it is even tougher because you've got the Tampa Bay Lightning at UBS Arena tonight. Well, let's look at whether Tampa needs a game or not. Well,
Yes,
I
think they do.
They're tied with Florida at 91.
Yeah.
And where is Florida? Will they be trying tonight? Guess what? They're in Montreal. They'll probably win that game. And Tampa has to win their game because that's really important to get that second or first spot. Get away from having to play Florida in the first round. Try to get up and grab first in that Atlantic division. So, by the way, Islander fans, yes, Tampa Bay will be very hungry tonight. Okay, let's get past that game. Let's go to their next game, which is coming up later in the week on Friday, Minnesota Wild. Well, does Minnesota need that game? Guess what, folks? Minnesota is in a fight now with St. Louis to stay in the 7 seed, and St. Louis could catapult the way they're playing. They could catapult up and over them. So Minnesota's going to be trying. They're not going to be resting anybody. So then you go down to the next game after that, and that one won't really be an easy one because you're playing the Capitals, the Washington Capitals on Sunday at 12:30 at UBS Arena. And guess what? There's a guy on that team, number 8, who can score goals and is trying to find that magical grade 8 thing over Gretzky. So I guess, Colin, I'm just trying to say, it is not going to be easy for the Islanders.
I haven't looked at the remaining schedule today or yesterday, but I did maybe about a week ago when I was assessing all these teams that were battling for the wild card spot. And Montreal had the easiest schedule. I think they had the 23rd most difficult schedule or whatever. And the Islanders had the 5th most difficult schedule. And this was a week or so ago when I last looked. So, yeah, I mean, just the teams that they're playing are good teams. And as you point out, Neil, motivated teams that have something to play for. Even Washington, which obviously has sewn up the number 1 seed, as you say, I mean, that could be a pretty momentous day if they're all trying to get goals for Ovechkin. So, and they're good. I mean, they're the real surprise to me. The Rangers swept them in the first round last year. They were the last team into the playoffs last year. I keep going back to last year because I can't believe so much has changed in 1 year. But they were the last team in Washington last year. They lost TJ Oshie. And yet here they are under Spencer Carberry, second-year coach, with best record in the East. I can't get over that. But, that's going to be very, very difficult for the Islanders. But you know what? The thing about the Islanders is they find a way. I mean, didn't they got in last year with that crazy win streak at the end. The year before, they got in on the last day. And they are all in. And I give them this. They play hard. And they do have goaltending. And that makes a big difference. Rangers, Islanders, Canadians, Detroit, only one of those teams is going to get in. But I can't write off the Islanders as much as things look bad. They seem to find a way, or at least they have in the last few years.
And I want to just make one comment before we move on to the Devils on what you just said about the Rangers and the Capitals. Had I told you that minus 38 goal differential Washington Capitals that somehow snuck under the back door and into the playoffs to play the President's Trophy team that swept them 4 straight, if after that handshake I'd looked at you and gone, Colin, a year from now, from now, the team, that one team is going to be the other team, and the other team is going to be that team. I mean, it's crazy. It's just crazy.
Would not have believed it.
Yeah.
Would not have believed that at all. But, it's not like they didn't make changes to Washington. They made changes.
They did
their roster.
Hey, they did it. Their whole staff, their whole thing, from Chris Patrick to Brian McClellan to everybody else, even Ted Leonsis, should all get Executive of the Year. I mean, they did a tremendous job in the offseason and during the season, from goaltending to defense to forwards. There isn't a single place where they missed a beat. Every move they made was the right move. And just look at Jacob Chychrun, who was not a household name when he was playing in Phoenix and then in Ottawa, and then Ottawa trades him, and now all of a sudden he's a $9 million defenseman. I mean, it's crazy. But Vic, let's go on to the Devs.
Yes. All right. Well, just before we make that transition, Capitals are now a plus 70 in their goal differential. So that's a 108 goal flip in a season. And they will be motivated in that game against the Islanders, if for no other reason that the President's Trophy is still in reach for them.
Play, yeah.
So, really for the Islanders, their schedule will soften up a little bit next week when they play Nashville and Philly, and that sandwiches around a big game against the Rangers. But if they don't show up this week and they don't deliver probably at least 2 wins against some pretty stiff competition, those softer games may be moved. So with that, we'll move on to the Devils. They have a 3-1 week, Colin. And this is a club that is comfortably nestled in third.
Are they, though?
Yeah, they are. They are.
Okay.
They're not moving. They're not moving. And in some of the discussions Neil and I have had, this is really a situation where you're going to play out the remainder of your schedule. You want to get your systems right. And they beat Chicago. They won in Minnesota. They won the return match in a shootout on Monday evening. Nico Hischier, career year, 33 goals this season. Jacob Markstrom, the guy that they're going to look to in net. But one of the concerning things I saw was that one loss that they had. And that was in Winnipeg on Friday, where they were shut out for the 8th time this season. And as they gear up for an opening round match against Carolina, which Devils are we going to see? The one that won 3 games this past week, or the one that was shut out in Winnipeg, and on occasion seems strapped to be able to score goals?
I think that the thing with the Devils, I think they're built for the long haul. I mean, I think that their roster was really put together very nicely by Tom Fitzgerald. If you go way back to when they first got Hischier with the number 1 overall, 2 years later they get Jack Hughes with the number 1 overall. They've built around those two guys. But I think he did a really nice job going out and getting Markstrom over the summer and stuff. But they've had some injuries too. Markstrom missed a lot of the season with an injury, and obviously Jack Hughes is out right now. So I don't know. The answer is I don't know what you're going to get from the Devils, but I do trust them. I do believe, again, a guy, I said it earlier, I love when a team has great goaltending, and the Devils do. And they have in Hischier a good two-way first line center at this point. He's not Auston Matthews or Connor McDavid, obviously, but I think they have a team that you can win with. And if you look at matchups, again, the playoffs are a different animal than the regular season. We get that, but you look at the regular season to give you an idea of what to expect. And I was just looking at the Devils' schedule and their head-to-heads. They're 2-2 against Carolina. I was wondering whether they might slip into the wild card spot if Ottawa catches them, but you assure me that that's not going to happen, Vic. So I guess I don't have to worry about that. So 2-2 against Carolina. And they have a better goaltender than Carolina does. So I mean, if you get to that series, let's say you beat Carolina, then everything opens up. I would have liked to have seen them fully healthy with Jack in play. But even without Jack, I think I still like them to make some noise in the playoffs.
Well, the wild card piece is going to be moot because they're in that 2-3, and I don't see the Rangers or the Islanders coming up to get them. Quickly, one of the great shining parts of the Devils season has been Jesper Bratt, who's having a career year. If he goes on a heater over the last 2.5 weeks of the season, he might even reach 100 points this year. And combined with Hischier, that's really where the bulk of the offense has been. They've gotten some really good contribution from Paul Cotter, but I think they need more. They need the Dawson Mercers. They need these types of players to step up and contribute. And, let's not also miss the fact that their top offensive defenseman, Dougie Hamilton, is also gone for the year.
Yeah, that's unfortunate as well. I mean, and that's what I'm saying. He built a team, did Fitzgerald, that is able to withstand significant injuries to a point. Obviously, if you keep having guys go down, eventually, you're not going to be able to survive. But
Yep.
they've survived to this point without Dougie Hamilton, without Jack Hughes, and it's really impressive. But nobody cares, right?
Yeah.
nobody cares that they didn't have these guys. All people are going to look at is can they win the cup? And I don't know. I mean, that's a long way away. I mean, it's 2 months worth of playoffs. I mean, I'm looking at their first round matchup against Carolina and thinking, I think they can get past Carolina. As is. I've seen a lot of Carolina in the last couple of years. The Rangers have played them, and again, I keep going back to last year and the year before that and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like I know Carolina pretty well, and I feel like their goaltending is where I always kind of I have a question, like, is it going to be good enough? And
Right.
And I think that if you're the Devils and you match up against Carolina, I think that's an area where the Devils will have a clear advantage.
Yeah.
I'm as I said a couple times, I'm a big goaltending guy, so I would expect the Devils to survive that series, and then do they have enough to go much further than that? I mean, can they get past the Tampas and Floridas or whoever awaits them in the later rounds? That we'll have to see. But I like them for where they are right now, and I really love that the squad is so deep that they've been able to kind of maintain their position, in the division and set themselves up and gives themselves a chance.
Just to finish off the Devils, guys, I'm going to just tell you that they have only 6 games to go, all against teams that are not currently in a playoff position. And 5 of those 6 games are at home, including 4 in a row coming up right now. And then the only road game is all the way out to Boston. So they only go to Boston on their one road trip before they fly to Raleigh, I guess, to start the playoffs. I do want to give a shout out to Tom Fitzgerald. He's been on the show with us before. I think, as much as I said about Washington's management, I think Tom Fitzgerald, by hiring Sheldon Keefe, getting Markstrom, and the other moves have been every move has been a good move. I think he's done a marvelous job there, and he should be at the awards, in line for one of the top 3 guys for GM of the year, on my belief. I think he's done a wonderful job with the Devils this year. And it's a shame that they lost Hamilton and Hughes, because Colin, I'm with you. I think if they hadn't lost those guys and the inconsistency that we've seen out of Carolina, and especially in their goaltending, that the Devils would have had a real shot. But I personally don't think they have a shot without Hughes and Hamilton. But it'll still be a good series, because they're gritty and they work hard and they show up every night. So, let's, for their sake and for Tom Fitzgerald and the job that he's done, I think it'd be great to see them at least make a great series out of it.
Yeah, I don't think we got to worry about that. I mean, I think that first round series, I think they'll give a good accounting of themselves, and the question will just be, how much further can they go after that?
This week, good week for the Devils to get rested, refreshed. A single game on their docket, and that is Saturday afternoon against the Rangers. So certainly, having played 76 games to this point, Devils are going to get some practice time, not too much competition. So really sets up well for them for the remaining 2.5 weeks of the regular season. So, Colin, before we go, we had trivia at the start of the show. Nobody is more New York hockey and New York centric than the Maven Stan Fischler, who turned 93 on Monday. He is still writing, still following the game through technology, still able to watch over in Israel. He has donated 90 of his books, at least, to UBS Arena that are on display at the Stan Fischler Press level. The first of his books were published in January of 1967. The question is, who was the subject?
Oh, so you're saying who and not what. So it's a guy and not a team.
Correct. One player.
Bobby Hull.
Right number.
Right number, huh? Huh.
Mr. Hockey.
Yeah, so it's Gordie Howe then, right?
Gordie Howe
It's got to be one of those two guys.
All right.
Yeah.
That would make sense. Yeah. Well, I mean, why not? Why not, right? I mean, he was the biggest guy. Let's do a story of the biggest guy.
Yeah.
And he certainly did. So, Colin, thanks so much for joining us today, breaking down the 3 New York area teams. Pleasure to have you, and please come back again.
I had a lot of fun with you guys, and anytime you feel the need and you got time for me, I'm down. I'm with you.
Great. That's great. Thanks, Colin. We really appreciate it.
All right, gentlemen, have a great day. I'm going to go watch practice now.
And Neil, I'll see you tomorrow on Short Shifts.